Welcome back, everyone, to Jface Games. So, I want to talk today about group design. Now, typically in a game, in a TTRPG, the way they handle group design, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, but typically what you'll see is that group design comes at it from two different ways. You've got sort of the tactical group design, and you've got the role-playing group design, right? And the way a lot of games do it currently is you first create your character. Now, during the character creation, that's when you're getting your tactical design. And then afterwards, you then create what's the kind of group design. This typically happens. Now, there are some games that have a strong theme to begin with, like Band of Blades or maybe some of the high school type games where it's like kind of what you are already. So that's fair. But in a lot of games, this is kind of how they handle it. And what you'll see typically is something like, when it comes to tactical design, it's kind of baked into the class you're playing. You can kind of flex it a little bit, but if you're a fighter, then you're probably going to be a little bit more the tanky. If you're a cleric, you're probably going to be more the support. If you're a rogue, you're probably going to be the DPS, right? There's some of that archetype that's kind of baked into those classes. So just by choosing the class in certain games, you're already kind of locking into the tactical group dynamic, right? Because I've been in plenty of groups where you're the last person to pick the class, and someone's like, well, we need a healer, or we need a this, and you're like, all right, I'll do it. Which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. I love those kind of games, right? I play those games a lot. But usually that's what you kind of see. And the other thing is then some games, not all games, some games start to look at what's the role-playing sort of mechanical side of the group design. And I'll show some examples. So here is, this was Kingdoms in Warfare by MCDM, Matt Colville. And so this was their kind of try to create an organization, right? And that organization has a theme, right? So this is the Martial Regiment, right? And then they have like the Thieves Guild, I think it's, or like the Scoundrels or something, the Merchant Guild. These are really cool because, right, it's kind of giving you that commonality amongst the group. Very neat, right? I'm a big fan of this. Then you have something like Distal. I loved this. Distal did these build organizations. And you've got this one line with this sort of Mad Lib style with these prompts. And again, the idea here is that during session 0, when you're beginning your sort of campaign, all the players are on the same page. We have a commonality. We have a common goal, sort of, so to speak. Now, these are all great, right? But I would there's all different ways to play it, but I want to see, let me put it that way, I want to see someone design a game where the first thing you do is you design the group dynamic, and maybe that is the character creation. Like there's no individual characters. So let me give some examples, right? Here are my boys, right? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? So maybe in the game, and not the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games, I'm just giving this as an example as a group. Maybe in the game, you choose your group dynamic. This group dynamic is the heroes that have to hide their identity, right? Group dynamic, right? Where it's the crime fighters hiding their identity, something to that effect. Where you're outcasts who are still trying to do good, etc. And what you do is you choose, we're going to play that group. Now that group has 4 roles in it. And these are thematic roles, right? One other thing is that they're all siblings. So sibling outcasts who are trying to do good. That's the group dynamic. Then you have one of the roles, the eldest, who is burdened with responsibility, is trying to be a leader and trying to be the moral compass. You have the rebel, who's very much a soloist. He's the chaotic good versus the lawful good, right? I'm talking obviously about Leo first, and now that's Ralph, right? Raphael has the anger management a little bit. He's still good. He's a contrarian, etc. Then you have Donatello, who's the individual who's the overly analytical. I'm going extreme here, but more rational than emotional, trying to problem solve with rationality as opposed to fix emotions. Then you have Mikey, the youngest, immature, the ignorer of problems, right? Just going to ignore the problem and let's just have a good time. Let's live life. Now, that might be interesting for people, right? Now you don't even have to, now within that group, maybe there are powers listed, and then you guys can decide who's going to choose which powers after you've decided on this is the role I'm going to play. And then what happens if that group dynamic is what levels, right? So now we look at things like Heart and Slugbusters that have these beats. What if the group dynamic has a beat, right? Maybe there's a shared backstory and a shared reasoning for becoming heroes. If you haven't checked out Draw Steel yet, Draw Steel does some really cool stuff. And one of the things I think it does really well is it has this sort of call to arms, like this call to heroism. And it gives these, after you choose like your background, it gives you these examples as to why you had a calling to become a hero, right? And it gives some great examples. And I love that. And it tries to keep them vague. And Colville just did a video on his channel about backstories, which was really great. But what if you have a shared backstory, this shared reasoning for why we as a group became heroes? And so, one, it makes it a lot easier for the Dungeon Master to remember the group's reasoning for becoming heroes as opposed to every individual's. And so that makes it really, I think, easy for the GM to start to like tie that in. But now it'd be really interesting to have this. We have a shared backstory as to why we became heroes. We have a shared leveling mechanic so that as the group levels, now we have these different story beats. So now it's like, what's the next story beat? Our group just leveled. Maybe the next story beat is, in this scenario, it's Leo and Ralph have a falling out, right? Maybe that's the next beat you got to go through. We have to solve this, whatever, etc. And this is on top of everything else you're doing in the game, right? What's another one? This might be another sort of way of handling this. How crazy would it be if there was a TTRPG that was inside out the TTRPG, right? Where in combat, in essence, there's one body, but there's all the players are manning that body. There's probably mech games that do this, where you're like Pacific Rimming it, right? Where you're all inside a mech, and that mech is, I'm the arm, and it's Voltron style. But how weird would it be to do like an inside out, and someone's playing the joy, and someone's playing the sadness, and someone's playing the anger? And what does that do in terms of turn order? And how does that design a game, and how does that person level up? This is a far out one. Let's do one that's a little bit more on the nose a little bit. Some of you, this is going to be dating myself, so bear with me. I started with the ones that might not date me as much. This one's maybe the choice of the TMNT, which image of Ninja Turtles I chose dates me, maybe. But here we go. Breakfast Club. Some of you probably haven't watched this movie. In essence, this movie is sort of about like outcasts, or not outcasts. There's only one. There's a couple outcasts, but it's the idea of like different people from different walks of life having to force time together and finding, commonality and breaking down stereotypes and yada yada. It's a great movie. It's probably dated. I haven't seen it in forever, but the idea here is what if one of the party groups that you choose, one of these dynamics, is in essence the Breakfast Club, right? Because each one of these individuals serves a plot reason. Every one of them has a plot role in this movie. You've got the sort of criminal bad boy, right? They're the catalyst for change, right? They're the individual who, they're not going to be quiet. They're going to push and provoke and push everyone else around them until those other people reveal truth, right? And they themselves, just because you're labeled a troublemaker doesn't mean that there's not some sort of vulnerability and hidden pain and yada yada underneath, right? So this is the instigator. The instigator is the person who pulls the others out of their sort of scenarios. So each one of these has that sort of role. You've got the athlete, right? The athlete who looks like perfect, they've got the perfect life, but they don't, right? They have this sort of conformist achiever sort of system they've got going on, but there's more to them, right? So it's all great, right? It's the idea of what would be the arcs that could be in this. So this is where now I would throw a question to y'all. If this were a game that was going to be designed, what would be the quintessential sort of group dynamics? Which is hard, I get it, that's hard. But what are some interesting group dynamics? Oh, the other thing I could say here is that if Breakfast Club doesn't hit, there's so many of these different outcasts come together to become a family. Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy is another one, right? That's the same kind of thing. You could also have a Dirty Dozens or Seven Samurai or, Magnificent Seven sort of archetype, right? Where it's different people coming together, right? Anyways, I'm saying right a lot. Anyways, the idea being, what would the different group potential dynamics be? What would be the quote-unquote roles or classes that fill that group? And then how would you approach leveling the group, the group itself levels versus the individual's level? And how would you still allow people to feel like individuals? Because that's one of the things we love, is that when we're in a game, it's we have this individual powers and individual abilities, and we start to sculpt our own story. But I think this would be a very interesting way of approaching party design, if that's the best way to say it. Anyways, that's my rambling for today. This all came out when I was listening to Peter from Tales of Elsewhere, him and his buddies. They did a long form podcast today, or I guess it came out today, with PhD RPG. I think that's the other main channel. And it was a great listen. And usually when I'm listening to something like that on the exercise bike, my brain's going other places, and this is what came. So it's good to be back on YouTube. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, check in, watch some other stuff. I'd like to be more active. All right, y'all.